Alfredo Sfeir-Younis en hij werkt in Genève bij de Wereldbank. En hij verzorgt daar de connectie met de Verenigde Naties en is iemand die vanmorgen sprak over human values and the responsibility of international organizations. Welcome. Alfredo, where are you from?
Thank you very much. My name is Alfredo. I'm from Chile. Originally I was born in Santiago, Chile, and now I'm in Geneva, working for the World Bank for the last 24 plus years. And I'm now the special representative of the World Bank at the UN and the World Trade Organization.
Over the past few months, the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank have been, well, I wouldn't say criticized, but have been the center of attention for their position in the world exactly about the border between human values and, say, monetary values. What's happening actually?
In fact, most of the people who are on the street, they're not only directing their attention to the World Bank, they're directing their attention to the global agenda. And certainly there are very few worldwide organizations, and therefore to zero in this debate on the global agenda, they zero in the criticism to the international development institution, including the one that I represent today. But essentially their main concern is not about what is not being done, but how it's being done, or if there is any leadership that is guiding us to this global agenda. Now clearly, for many people, this global agenda is expressed as, number one, that economics is not that all matters. You know, that economic values and monetary values are only part of the whole agenda.
Happiness is not only material things.
Exactly. That human welfare, that the human betterment goes far beyond material betterment. Even for those who don't have enough in their material world, still the non-material, the human, the spiritual, the moral, the ethical, those values that go with identity, self-realization, are certainly very important, and people express that in that way.
Yeah. But what we have seen is many people protesting. Now, how do you see from the inside, from the World Bank, those people? Are they your enemies or are they your supporters actually, in a specific way?
I think they are not enemies to us at all. I think they are agents of change, and at this particular point in time they're seeing that many of the international financial institutions are not changing fast enough. I think in fact, leaving aside those who are there
throwing bombs and stuff like that.
Exactly, but the core of people I think are our allies, and we have already in the last annual meeting of the World Bank the representation of more than 350 NGOs and community organizations inside the building. So there's not a question between the ones outside and inside, except for those who are essentially interested in just trouble. But
okay. Are you saying that their arguments about the division of the world in rich and poor and the effects of globalization and the effect of the internet economy on the world are ringing true in your organization? Is that something that you've picked up?
Absolutely. I think they're absolutely right. They're absolutely right that there is a huge wealth divide, that there are too many poor people in the world. They're absolutely right in the sense that the environment is being degraded. They're absolutely right in that basic social institutions like family and individuals are breaking down because of the way the global economy is going. And I think that we are listening very, very carefully to them, not with just listening, but trying to embody some of their basic points, as we have done in the past, on the environment, on gender equality, on human rights, on poverty eradication.
Yeah. One of the things that the third world nation or the developing nation claim is that after the colonization, you know, with force and military people, we now have a period of neo-colonization where the financial institutions and the interest rates and the loans are burdening as much as in the previous era where there were military powers. Is there a way out of that situation where developing countries are so much depending on the money they got from, say, the West?
I think that if colonization in a sense is translated as dependency in some form or another, clearly today all the economies, not only the developing countries, or as you call it the third world, but also the middle income countries and the high income countries depend on this global economy. The question is how can you benefit from the global economy? And here you have to distinguish three layers. One layer is the given. We are more interconnected. Transport is cheaper. Email exists, and so on. So that part is a sort of the natural body of evolution of having 6 billion people and maybe having 12 billion people in the future. The other part of globalization, which is the part that has to do with policies and instruments that guide somehow the ultimate objective of globalization. And here I think there is a lot to be said, and I think that we need to worry about the poor, the voiceless, the powerless, the countries that are not benefiting from globalization, and the bank is an instrument for these countries to really integrate better and do it faster. Now, within this process, there are some constraints which are fundamental. One of them is the debt issue that you just mentioned, and we are dealing with it in the best way we can, and this is the whole objective of the highly indebted country initiative, where we're trying to look at not only the debt with the World Bank, which is minimum by comparison to bilaterals and others, but also the whole debt package. But that's not all. Even if we resolve the debt tomorrow, there are still fundamental issues being raised as to how we deal with poverty eradication, how do we deal with environment, how do we deal with child mortality, how do we deal with gender equality, racism, discrimination, and I can go on the list. The third layer is a layer of human uncertainty. I think that people that are connecting to this first layer of communication, transport and so on, and the second layer on economic disparities, they're feeling a great deal of uncertainty as to how they fit within globalization, how do they connect with it. And at this point in time there is
Is that on both sides? I mean, you can understand that the poorer countries in the world feel uncertain, but I have a feeling that also the rich countries feel uncertain. In Holland we have had a period where we did development aid in a certain way under the Minister Pronk, who was now head of the climate conference. We're now moving into another era. And for me, it feels as even the richer nations don't really know how to handle it. A good example is this week, Suriname, one of our former colonies, got a gift from the government, $8 million or whatever. But you know for what? To build a justice building, a courthouse. Like our paternalistic attitude shows we're giving them a courthouse, like you have to follow our laws. I feel that attitude that we are still, in the West, richer and better, is part of the problem.
I agree with you that the uncertainty is all over. There are certain degrees of uncertainty, and there are certain understanding, maybe different understanding of where the source of this uncertainty is. But clearly, if the New York Stock Exchange falls, naturally, you're going to have a big uncertainty not only in the developing countries but in the developed world. If the price of oil climbs up, excessively, naturally, not only the developed world, but if governance structures, fall down, if institutions are not there, governments, international institutions, and the market is not performing, everyone is there. So I think this uncertainty is not only in the developing countries, but in but the context of the uncertainty is rather different in developing countries, where you don't have much material, or you don't have too many assets, productive assets, against which you can balance that uncertainty.
But is that changing? The climate conference this week was a big discussion about CO2 emission rights, and it seemed that countries considered very poor, I mean Brazil, Suriname, Guyana, which have large natural resources in the form of woods and CO2 emission rights, so to speak, we might have a different balance of economies in 10 years or 20 years' time.
Absolutely. I think that to think about the world of the future as a sort of a linear projection of the world of the past, economically, financially, technologically, humanly, socially, globally, is absolutely wrong. And we believe that it is time to construct now and select now the instruments that will be capable to deal with the 6, 10 billion, 12 billion people in the world, and with these uncertainties you're talking about. Countries that have resources have to manage it differently. Countries that do not have natural resources might have human resources, and so they have to manage it also. So it's, I think the speed of transformation has been increasing at an increasing rate, and this challenge of how to manage this speed of transformation is for everyone to really, it's not only a developing...
Is the World Bank developing new tools? Like we were talking about large amounts of money that would be involved in the CO2 emission rights. That's one thing. Another point is that the Western world, America, Europe, we need a lot of people now. We have this disbalance in our demographics. We need a lot of people. Is the World Bank developing tools to guide the process of emission rights, the new resources, human and economic, to to translate them in some kind of monetary system?
Yes, the World Bank is in fact an institution which also transforms itself with the transformation of change. With regard to the human resources, the essence of the World Bank mission today is the eradication of poverty, and the approaches of the past, which is just to grow and then expect that there will be a trickle down to the poor, is not anymore part of our business. That doesn't mean that growth is not part of our business, because without growing you don't have anything to distribute. But if you see, our new approaches have to do with self-identity of the poor, empowerment of the poor, creating opportunities and creating institutions by the poor and for the poor, listening to the poor rather than being paternalistic and somehow directing where the change should be. We're thinking about new forms of government and new forms of governance. Governance in a sense that we need government, for public or good, and new forms of organizing development, which we call governance. The second layer where the bank is working on is on the global agenda, the global warming, ozone layer, biodiversity depletion, the environment, the control and elimination of global diseases like HIV/AIDS and river blindness. And we are part and parcel of this program. In fact, we are the largest financier, not only of human development in the world, but also on these global public goods.
Just coming back to Sri Ravi Shankar and his ideas, I think it's called the 5H programs about human values and stuff like that. How much is the World Bank thinking in line with what he brings, which is a very old, little bit Hinduistic message from the East, and what you're thinking about the world now?
I believe that Sri Ravi Shankar, I don't know him, I don't belong to his group particularly, I've been invited here as a guest, but I believe that the concern for human values, he is doing a tremendous job to create awareness and help people to self-realize those values, because this is not a matter of theory, it's a matter of being of those values. Now, we believe at the World Bank that these human values are universal. They're not Indian or Chilean or Americans and so on. And I think the question that we need to ask today is why these values are not permeating or being the organizing principle of decisions that have to do not only with our intimate human decision, but also political decision and economic decisions. And we have a values group at the World Bank. We have a dialogue which is called Faith and Development with many of the religious leaders. The president of the World Bank has been leading, major working groups and major international associations and dialogues with the faith and spirituality, where Hindus, Jewish, Catholic, Protestant, and so on. We strongly believe that they have a point of view, and that in fact they are a huge organized force, of these human values.
To be used.
Yeah,
but maybe a little bit critical. Yeah, maybe a little bit critical, but when you talk about universal values, it's obvious that, say, in North America and in the West, that individual development, it ranks higher than social coherence. But in other nations, in less developed countries with different religious systems, social coherence and being part of the whole might rank higher than individual development. How does the World Bank cater for those differences in value scales?
Okay, number one, let me just make one distinction, is that human values are universal and they have nothing to do with behavior. Behavior is the next step. You can have individualistic behavior, or you can have collective behavior. You can trust the government to lead, you can trust the individual to lead, you can trust the market to lead, or the international organization. That is the behavioral part. The human values are like caring, sharing, fraternity, love, and all these human values, self-identity, they are nothing to do with necessarily with individualism. Now, the second layer of your question, which I think is where you're trying to hit at, that here we have these human values which are collective and global, and on the other side we are promoting economic systems or market systems that are relatively individualistic. I think we have to keep a balance. I think the individual behavior, individual motivation, individual competitiveness is an important edge in many activities that we need to do. We cannot change human values by bad economics. I am not suggesting that. I don't think anyone is suggesting that. I think to be good economics, you need to have this individualistic, promoted value. But the question is, to what extent just individualistic based economics will reach what the collective wants? And here is where human values are fundamental. So this individualistic behavior needs to amount to collective betterment. And for the time being, individualistic behavior is not tantamount of collective betterment. And that's where human values come in, because the resolution to the collective betterment, poverty, environment, global public good, requires collective and global action and not just individualistic action.
Oké. En dat was dus Alfredo Sfeir-Younis. Hij is van de Wereldbank en vertegenwoordigt de Wereldbank in Genève bij internationale organisaties zoals de UNESCO. En zijn visie is duidelijk, maar we zijn toch blij dat we ook de beelden van dat protest in Praag tegen het IMF en de World Bank kunnen laten zien. Op deze